He had a question next. Where did you go from? Evening. My name is Charlotte Askew Jenkins. I was born in 10 Mile, Arundel. I attended the Gregory School, which we call the Yellow House. It's located on 7 Mile. It's still there. It's being occupied, a resident. It's a resident now. But in the back there was a tiny little building, which you can see as you go down 17, and that was the first grade. I started that school in, I think it was 1949, and from that first grade, we moved to the big, we call it the big house. In the big house, they had, it was a large room. They housed the second grade and the third grade. And I attended that until the third grade. And the third grade, then we moved to Lang, Janie Moore, which is located, Janie Moore School. And from Janie Moore, I ended up going to Lang. When I was pretty, my first grade was very, I could remember, I can't remember a whole lot, but I do remember walking, and I do remember sometime my older brother, he would drop us off. He had a car, and he would drop us off, but we did walk, and it was about 2.5 miles from where we live. In my first grade, I enjoyed that. Well, I guess it was first, going to school. And there was one thing that I always remember. There was a little girl in my class. She got choked on a red sucker, the lollipop. And it brought a lot of confusion there because nobody knew how to handle it. But she finally got it out. But my experience there was sometimes the room was cold. The boys would go out and get coals and wood to keep the fire going in the winter. And that's about all I remember because I started in 1949, and if you do the math, you know how old I am.
Good evening. My name is Jeanette Gillian Lee, and I live in the 7 Mile section of Mount Pleasant. I started at the old 7 Mile school in 1949 with my brother, which I was born in 1944, so I wasn't old enough to go to school. But Mama sent me with Alan because there wasn't a babysitter at the house, and so all the other mothers in the area decided to send their children too. So I got put out of school in 1949, my first year, and all the other children that their parents tried to get them, and they had to leave too. So I actually started school in 1950.
They can operate. If it ever does not become a school, then the property reverts back to the Presbyterians. The other interesting thing about Avery, and I want you to understand the difference between the mindset. The American Missionary Association established Avery in 1865 and Lang the next year.
Correct.
But there was a concentration. The thought pattern was different. If you went to Avery, we knew we were going to college. How we were going to get there, we had no idea, but we knew if we wanted to go, we were going to get there. It was a classical education. The other black schools at that time concentrated on sewing, brick masonry, carpentry, and in later years, when I say later years, I'm talking about in the 50s and 60s, electricity. Most of the teachers at that time were graduates of Avery. because the late Burns Forsythe, who taught at Lang, Avery graduate. Isaiah Miller, who's still alive, that might have taught some of you, Avery. Eugenia Duncan, the last librarian of Lang, Avery. The last principal of Lang, Fletcher Linton, Avery. So back in those days, most of the teachers that taught, their roots were at Avery. Now, where did they get their education? There was just something among the black population. There were certain schools where they sent their children. Fisk University was one. Hampton University was another one. Talladega College was another one. Benedict College, South Carolina State. And our coach at Avery graduated from West Point, Luther Bligen, graduated from West Point. What was high school like at Avery? We had drama, we had the choir, we had the debate team, we had the high Y, and the high Y was for boys, tri-high Y for girls, and we met at 4 o'clock on Sunday. And the purposes of both of them were to teach us the social skills. That was drilled into us. And in order to be in the high Y or the tri-high Y, you had to maintain an average of 3.0 at Avery in order to be in the high Y. Now, when I graduated in 1951, I could not attend the Citadel. I could not go to the College of Charleston. There was no Charleston Southern or Baptist College. But Charleston County Council came up with $1,200 scholarship for black children. Well, South Carolina State College didn't cost $900 then, total. So we decided we were going after those scholarships. And there were 3 people that I met from Lang. Colonel William Mazik, who is retired now, Jeanette Pinckney, and Estelle Brown. Estelle Brown was a whiz in math. Dummies like me, if we had a math problem and we didn't understand it, we found Estelle. So Estelle would charge us 25 cents an hour. She got a lot of my money because it took me more than an hour to understand the mechanics. But they came from Lang. There were 4 of us from Avery. That's 7. There were 2 from Burke. That's 9. And the other 3 came from ICS. And we all went up to South Carolina State. And the balance of our $1,200, and State College didn't cost but a little more than 8 something, we got a stipend, $32 a month, as the rest of our money. So now you think about 1951 to 1955, that was a lot of money. You know, you in college, all your bills are paid, you know. So I got a good education at Avery, got a good education at South Carolina State. And the interesting tidbit about me, you're looking at the first black man that ever taught in a white school in Charleston County. That's me. Now, I did not change my method of teaching. I worked your butt off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And if you did well those 4 days, you had no homework on Friday. I corrected every paper. When I went to the white school, I didn't change. Now, some people say the books were different. They weren't when I went to James Simmons. But James Simmons had cleaner books than Buse. I can tell you that. And if I had never gone to that white school, I never would have been an administrator. Because I did the principal's job at the black schools. I was just a classroom teacher. I did all the discipline. I was on yard duty. I was on cafeteria duty. I did the book room. When I got to the white school, Mr. Rowland called me in and says, Walter, I understand that you did the book room at Buse. I said, yes, sir. He says, you want your check now? I said, check? What check? He said, that's a $2,000 stipend. I said, what? Now, mind you, I just got married. That's a lot of money. So I said, well, ha, ha, ha. He said, well, I can give it to you now. I said, tell you what, that's my children's Christmas. Give me $1,000 in December. Give me the rest of the money in May. Now, I don't know if that was made available at the black school, but if it was, I never got it. Then I was able to work on my master's degree. Here again, I couldn't go to the Citadel. I couldn't go to the College of Charleston. But if I wanted to go out of state, the poor state of South Carolina would have paid all of my tuition. But instead, I decided to go to South Carolina State, my alma mater, and I got my master's, and I got 30 years above that. Taught for 17 years. The last 21 years, I retired as Director of Federal Programs for Charleston County Public Schools. So between Miss Mary Frazier, and I get full when I think about that lady, Miss Mary Frazier, Avery, and South Carolina State, and my parents, Walter and Delphine, and my grandmama Lucretia, instilled those values in me, and that has taken me to where I am today. And I'm full today because my wife was supposed to be here with me, but she left me on January the 3rd at 7:27 a.m., but I know her spirit is here. And I can tell you, she loved Lang. Now, I don't know how many of you know Jimmy Bagwell, and I'm going to shut up. Jimmy Bagwell lived on the corner of Pitt and Vanning Street. And it's a true story, and she told Jimmy she couldn't stand Jimmy Bagwell. And the reason being, Jimmy could walk 2 blocks from his house to go to Moultrie, and she was right in Moutrie's mouth, and she had to get on a bus and go 6 miles to school. And she told Jimmy about that. Of course, you know, we all friends now, but she couldn't stand Jimmy because of that, because of the discrimination. Here she was, you could stand in our front yard and throw a brick in Moultrie School, and she had to get on a bus and go 6 miles to school. But I can tell you, she graduated in the class of 1960 from Lang, and they still meet. That's one of the few classes from Lang that meet every month. They're all up in age now, but they still meet. And Lang was our sister school. So there's a closeness between Avery and Lang. We are one because we came from the same parent.
But I think you said now at Long Point School we had from first to fifth grade, and we went to from first to fifth grade, and if you graduate during that time, you go to Lang in Mount Pleasant. Now, the amount of students that was there, I cannot remember. But I know something was mentioned, and I'll mention it again, that the property was given to us by the Holmes family to continue to get the school to renovate. And while I'm talking about the school being renovated, this is the only school I think over here now that still look pretty much the same as it was back in the days of the 40s or the 1906. But still look pretty much the same, the two rooms. So we're trying to renovate it. We got it in Snowden, and we're trying to renovate it. And like since I'm talking about it, we're still looking for folks to help us to get it renovated, and that's in funds. And I heard Mr. Brown mentioned about Avery. Now, when I went to the military, came back and went to Avery, I did see books marked for colored children only. Now, I saw that with my eyes. So there was a system, I guess you could say had two systems. One that made sure that colored kids get a certain level of education, and then white get another level. And what was that other question?
How many kids attended?
Okay. I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember how many kids attended.
Can I just make one thing now? I have to speak to that. I graduated from Avery, 3rd grade through 12th grade. I never saw a book that says for colored children. I handled the book room at Buse, all-black school, and I never saw a book that said for colored children. I went to James Simmons, handled the book room. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I can say in my experience, I never saw one. The next thing I could say, I've heard people say this, that they've had teachers to tell them they were never going to be any good. I have never had a teacher to tell me that. And I've never told none of my children that. And I taught both black children, white children, on all levels. Some of the white children were poor. But I didn't treat them no differently from the other ones whose parents had the wealth. And I can tell you, I began with 45 children in a 4th grade class in 1955 in Columbia, South Carolina. No teacher aide. And I taught all those children. So don't tell me you can't teach them. If you know your pedagogy and your plan, you can teach children. Now, the difference now are the parents. Parents back then, when I began teaching, they respected the teachers. And we had to dress a certain way. In the black schools, you wore shirt and tie every day. But now, the way some of these teachers dress, you wonder where they're going. I mean, times have changed. But I had a little boy in my class, Roosevelt. His mother and I attended Ebenezer together, and she said, "Mr. Brown, you costing me money." I said, "What you talking about?" She said, "You haven't noticed my son with shirt and tie every day?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, you pay attention." And I started, and he had a shirt and tie on every day. Then he started wearing a little sport coat. Well, he was emulating his teacher. So then I taught them about dressing. And I ran into trouble every place I taught in the elementary school, in the cafeteria. Because you teach kids how to use utensils. You don't eat every food with a spoon. You don't do that. So I ran into trouble everywhere I taught, black school and the white school, because I had my children to go down to the cafeteria, set the table, and we learned table manners. And if you don't teach people that, you go out to eat sometime and you see adults really don't understand table etiquette. And it starts in elementary school and it starts at home. But if the parents don't have the skills, then that's where the teachers come in. And I can talk about teaching all day. I love it. I love it. I can't do it anymore because I'm too old. But if I can help a child, and I watch my little 3-year-old. I got a little 3-year-old grandson. And he told his mother was in an accident. He told his mother, call 999. That man gives you a lot of money. So she had to explain to him, it doesn't come like that. You know. But they advertised in the Columbia market, and he lives in Columbia, and he saw that. But the key to everything we've done up here, all these young people up here, I can call them young because I'm older than them, is education. They've all been successful because they got a good education. And that has sustained them. That has sustained them. Miss Charlotte, her business, Miss Pearl and her business, the Reverend and his business, Jeanette in the cage up there, and a good AME. Their education has sustained them. And they all got it between Lang, and I got mine at Avery. The all family.
Let me mention. Let me mention this. The teachers that we had when I was at Lang was Ms. Jemison and Ms. Latson. And I want to add to what Mr. Brown said right quick. When talking home, we had a different. When we integrated, we had a different culture. Now, when I went to school and at home, it was yes, ma'am, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. That's the way we was taught at home. And the teachers was just like parents in our segregated school. And you better say yes, ma'am, yes, sir to those teachers. When they integrated, I started hearing yes and no. That's kind of floored me. A child saying yes to a grown-up and no, but like you said, that's a different teaching altogether now. So that's all I, go ahead.
When I graduated from Lang Elementary here in the Old Village, I went, it was 7th grade. Matter of fact, I still have my diploma. I found it the other day. I was so excited. Cute little diploma with the school on the back, inserted in it. It was about, I think we had about 2 7th grade classes at that time that matriculated to the 6 Mile Lang site. And it probably was about 30, 40 students doing my lower 1st through 7th grade. But when I graduated from high school in '63, it was approximately 87 students. And also I wanted to piggyback on what Mr. Brown is saying about Avery, because Avery and Lang are sisters per se. It's factual, really. Lang, January 29, 1866, as an industry art school, if you will, teaching the trade of that day. My thing is with Lang, that Lang was always a STEM school, because we taught what was necessary during that time. Cobbling, earlier on, seamstress and whatnot. But I also want to mention that for Abby Monroe served the longest as a principal there. She served over 30 some odd years after Hancock. And the first African-American principal was Antoinette O'Neill. She was born and reared right here in South Carolina. Matter of fact, her son, Tony, no, that's not her son, I'm sorry.
Nephew.
That's right, grandnephew. He's an attorney here. And she attended Avery as well, along with Miriam Moore Brown. She attended Avery. She was a principal at the Gregory School, too, and as well as here at the Lang Elementary School. And another Mr. Michael Graves, James Michael Graves, he attended the Avery Institute. And as Mr. Brown is saying, when you attended Avery, you matriculate on to other colleges, if you will. And we know they're all HBCUs, historically black and colleges and universities. But as I said, it was about 87 of us when we graduated from Lang in 63. Yeah.
Well, in my first grade, it was probably about maybe 10 to 15 students, because I could remember that there weren't that many. And when I graduated to the second grade, which in the big house, we call it the big house, it was divided, it was second and third. And to me, it was no more than about 40 people. It was, 20, seemed like it was 20 on one side and 20 on the other side. But also, during the time when I got into second and third grade, a lot of the students, and we all did, we had to go on the farm because that was income for us. So there were days missing. So at some given time, there were quite a few students missing. And when I and from the third grade to Janie Moore, and from Janie Moore to Lang, and our graduation class was about 72. Arthur and myself and Jeanette graduated the same year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there were 72 in our class.
Well, I could say about Lang, like we had the industrial school, like Pearl said. They taught a lot, and we were the school that accepted the veterans when they came back from the Army. A lot of veterans graduated from Lang High School because the doors were open for them. And a lot of our teachers that taught at Janie Moore School, they went to AME School, Allen University, and Columbia, because the AME Church did have a school for the children to go to when they graduated from Lang High School. Most of them went as high as 11th and 12th grade from there. Then they went on to Allen University and became teachers. And some of them became doctors. And we even have the late Billy Jenkins. Billy went to ICS, but he graduated from Lang. He was an infectious disease doctor, and he left us about 3 years ago.
He had a PhD.
So, we had quite a few. We had lawyers. Lang produced good students because we had teachers that were interested in us when we were coming up. They take the time out from us, and if there was another child in the class that couldn't keep up, then the other ones who were more advanced, they would help that child out. And the teachers grade their papers, saying too, like Mr. Brown said, and sometimes we would help them in class so they wouldn't have all that work to do when they got home. But we had good teachers, and Lang was a great school to graduate from at that particular time.
Okay, thank you. And I know that we've already kind of touched on these subjects, but I just want to make sure that I'm getting all the questions in. So I'm going to ask several this time. Again, what were your teachers like? Were they Black? Were they white? What teacher or teachers impacted your educational experience the most, and why? And what was your favorite class subject? What kind of resources were available to you? So just any of those questions that I know that we've touched on a few of those.
Well, all of my teachers were Black, and my favorite subject was social studies, number one, and math, number two. And my favorite teacher was Mrs. Hicklin, and she died 6 months ago. And there's one teacher left from Avery, Cynthia McCartry Smith. And God willing, on the 7th of next year, she'll be 100 years old. She is now in Winston-Salem, but we are planning a surprise birthday party for her. She is the last one from Avery that's still alive.
Let's hope she's not watching. It won't be a surprise.
She's watching with my big mouth. I put it out there. I hope she's not watching.
All of my teachers were black also. And my favorite teacher, I think, was Mr. Hilton. Mr. Hilton,
Hilton.
yeah, James Hilton was my favorite
Chemistry.
teacher. And my favorite subject was math and science. Math is really my favorite subjects. Yeah, Mr. Hilton was my favorite teacher. Yeah.
I loved all of my teachers. They all were favorites. I enjoyed social studies and history. I just love history, going back, way back when. Just for information and knowing the knowledge of our people and our country, honestly. Those are my two favorite subjects. And all of my teachers was pretty good. I did have one math teacher, Mrs. Houston. That was like in 1960, probably 1961, 62. She was a math teacher. She was so young.
That's Marie. Huh? She just died.
Yeah, I saw her
Marie
picture in the
Houston?
paper.
Yeah,
She just died.
I thought
Her
that was
funeral is tomorrow.
really?
She dies in
really,
Rock Hill.
Oh, well,
Marie Houston.
anyway, I remember her very well, too.
All of my teachers were black. My first grade teacher, I always admired her. She was so beautiful. She had long black hair and she had smooth, dark complexion. She was beautiful. My second grade teacher, she was Miss Weathers. I didn't like her too much.
Now she knows.
She was a little mean, but the best teacher was in high school, and she was my home economic teacher. I just fell in love with her, and she, we took sewing, and I got involved in cooking because I was cooking since I was 9. So that was that was my best subject in school. But I did well in all the other classes, but it was, yeah.
I just wanted to mention that my sister taught me in second grade. So, you can do the math a little bit there, too. She had just graduated from Benedict College. Benedict College was a Baptist HBCU, and she taught me in second grade right across at Lang Elementary.
My favorite subjects in school was citizenship and history. And Mr. Brown was one of my teachers that I loved until he left here, because even when we got out of school, he would still come and visit my mother, because she would always tell my mom that don't give Alan no money for summer school, because Alan's staying in school to play football. Make him get out of that school. So Alan finally graduated out of school. He went into the military. He served 2 terms in Vietnam. And I love history because the late Robert Coleman, he knew my great-grandmother by visiting Boone Hall Plantation, because she worked and lived on Boone Hall Plantation for 55 years. My mother was born and raised on Boone Hall Plantation. So I was always a person interested in history, and she didn't leave nothing unturned. She tell us everything. And I appreciate her to this day for, giving me that knowledge of what was going on back then. And another one of my teachers that I like a whole lot was Miss Rivers. I loved her, and Twilda Bennett. And she got married to Mr. Bennett while she was in school. And I was sitting in class. I said, oh, I wish she would give the baby name Theodessa when the baby born. So she must have heard me. She gave her name Theodora. I said, oh, wow. What about that? But I love history to this day. I think Reverend Pinckney beat me to the punch. He went back to College of Charleston. I think his major was history.
Yeah, when I went back.
His major was history. I just love history.
Awesome. Like most of you, I loved all my teachers too. Most of my teachers were white. The only black teacher I had while attending Porter Gaud was Mr. Sproul, and that was in 6th or 7th grade. I can't remember, but it was a history, social studies class. And my favorite subject was English. Okay, so the next question we have, the landmark Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case outlawed segregation in schools in 1954, but many segregated schools were not integrated until many years later. Please speak about your experience with segregated or integration in schools.
Well, I lived some of that. As I mentioned earlier, when I graduated in '51, there were no black high schools in North Charleston nor West Ashley. But then in the late '50s, in South Carolina, they came up with something separate but equal. And that goes back to the case of Plessy and Ferguson, where the United States Supreme Court ruled that you could have separate facilities if they were equal. Well, there's no such thing as separate but equal. But there was a huge infusion of dollars in South Carolina. Jimmy Burns was the governor at the time. And that's where all these new schools came online. That's when they built the new Lang. And I've got a picture here of Lang. That's the old Lang. It used to be on the corner of King and Royal Avenue. That's the picture of Lang. How did I get this picture? Colleges and universities write grants. Major professors write grants. Clemson University wrote a grant. I think the lady's name is Miss Ham. Michael Allen mentioned that last week. Well, she came through and did a study east of the Cooper, but she didn't complete it. She's now at University of Georgia. Sure. And some of her students came through and dabbled at it, but didn't do a good job. So that study is still not finished. But to make a long story short, all this infusion of money came into South Carolina, and throughout the 46 counties in the state, they built brand new high schools for black children. All of that to keep from integrating. But you and I know what happened. Eventually, schools were integrated. Now, I experienced some of that at James Simmons. Some of you might have been patients of F. Strait Ferry. But Strait Ferry and I were together for 45 years. He'd only been in practice for 47, just retired last year. But his wife taught at James Simmons, 6th grade. I was the grade level chairman. Integration came, and all these kids came from Rhett. Now, Mr. Jenkins was the disciplinarian. He ran a good school up at Rhett, right across from Burke High School. The building is still there. That was the elementary school. Well, these black kids came to this white school, and, you know, Mrs. Ferry didn't know what to do with them. I mean, she couldn't teach them. They were just raising all holy, holy, holy. So I put my head in the door, and I called her. I says, she had about 5 or 6 white kids, take them next door to my class. And I went and I started calling them Talbot, Brown, DeWeese. They look. I said, now, I know your mama, know your grandmama, know your daddy. And I wasn't going to whip them. But I put the fear in them. And that straightened that class up. Now, I did such a good job until they outscored my class. Now, I don't know about that. I didn't like that too well. But when they got the test scores back, because those kids were really smart. They were smart. But if I hadn't gone in there, the lady couldn't teach, bless her soul. She couldn't teach them, you know. And they were going to try her because they know she was not of the same complexion as they were. So I lived that integration thing and the segregation thing. I lived that. Now, another experience I had, and my wife always told me, well, they knew you didn't go to integrate. I didn't think about that. But I had a project. And I knew then if I went to Dot Hall, that was the black library on the corner of Bogart and Dot Street. No, yeah, Bogart and Dot Street, yeah, Dot Hall, that's right. I got it right. Miss Purcell would tell me, now, Walter, you have to wait a week. Well, at that time, the county library was in the Michael House, a huge historical house that still exists on the corner of Montague and Rutledge Avenue. Avery was 2 blocks south. So I said, the heck, I'm going to the white library. And I went. The librarian came out, and she says, can I help you? I says, I'm a student at Avery, and I'd like to use your facility. She said, do you know how to use the card catalog? I said, yes, ma'am. I went to the card catalog, found what I wanted, went to the shelf, got my book, and I was in 10th grade. I never did go back to that black library. Now, you know, like my wife says, dummy, they knew you didn't come to integrate, so they let you in. But if I'd gone to the black library, I would have had to wait 2 weeks for the book. 2 weeks for the book. And I went right there, presented myself, carried myself in a nice disposition, clean, intelligent, got what I wanted, and went on. Now, the last thing I'd like to mention about Avery. Avery closed in 1954. And I'll never forget this man, Wilmot Guthke. He was the fire chief. There was nothing wrong with Avery. He condemned Avery, said it was a fire trap. Well, they never wanted us there, but as long as the AMA owned the property, there was nothing the city of Charleston could do with it. Time it became a public school, that was what they were looking for. So they sold the property to Palmer College. Follow me closely now. Mm-hmm. Palmer College is the forerunner of the technical college system in the state of South Carolina. And that's one of the greatest things that the late Senator Fritz Holland did. He did a lot of things, but that's one of the big things, because he instituted that technical college system when he was governor of the state of South Carolina. When we had pep rallies, usually a pep rally you play on Friday, pep rallies on Thursday. We couldn't have it Thursday night. We'd have to have it at 12 o'clock during the day because the whites didn't want us there. Mr. Palmer bought the building, painted it white. All the bricks white. Well, Palmer College became Trident Tech. The building was just there, so in 1978, some graduates of Avery and some friends of Avery established the Avery Institute of Afro-American History and Culture. Then in 1985, we had Governor West, Democratic governor, Democratic House of Representatives, Democratic Senate. We had the late Herbert Fieldings as a senator, and we had McKinley Washington as a senator. So everything was right. We got them to introduce a bill in Columbia to establish the Avery Institute of Afro-American History and Culture Research Center at the College of Charleston. So 125 Bull Street still exists, and it is a part of the College of Charleston. And I had the opportunity to make history, because I didn't realize it then, that my class of 1951 was the first class to have 2 students to serve as president of Avery, and I served 8 years, longer than anybody else, and I'm still on the board at Avery. So the school still exists, and it's because of the efforts of the late Lucille Simmons Whipper, who died last year. Had it not been for Lucille's efforts, there would be no Avery Research Center. So it's there, it's open to the public. We do a lot of great things. Now, we are not a part of the International African American Museum. We're not a part of them. We got our own board. They do their things, but they're going to have to borrow from us because they don't have nothing. And when you go to Fort Moultrie and see all them shackles belong to us. Those are Avery shackles. When you go to the slave mark on Chalmers Street, and if we take all our stuff back out of there, they would have to close. That's Avery stuff. And I've made doggone sure that they know that. So with my eyes closed, we'll make sure that we still own that stuff, because you know if you don't document stuff, and you close, your eyes closed, and everybody who know about is dead, things disappear. So I want to make sure it's on loan, and it's been at Fort Moultrie long enough now. It's time to come back home. It's been there too long. But those are our artifacts. Now, the problem we have is with my folk, my black folk. We don't want to give up nothing. You know, we keep it, and we don't tell our children the importance of it. And they go through when you die and just give it all away, and they give away the history. So our white friends out there, if you've got stuff that you might think is junk, bring it to Avery. Your junk, what you call junk, might be our history. Because our history is woven. It's woven. If you check your DNA, you'll find that, you know, I ain't all black, and you ain't all white. We all intertwine. And when we give blood, it's different, of course, because of the type, but it's all red. I ain't never seen no white blood. I ain't never seen no black blood. All I've seen was red blood. So I applaud this town of Mount Pleasant for having Black History Month. I applaud this town of Mount Pleasant for having Black History Month. Because of all the municipalities, this is the only one that focuses the entire month to celebrate our history. Now, the city of Charleston have spatterings here and spatterings there and all that, but not a whole month focus. Not a whole month focus. And the town does that. And it started, I think, 8 years ago. And I applaud them for that. And Mount Pleasant is not a bad place to live. We ain't perfect, but we are sure better than a lot of other places. We show better, and we are getting better. A whole lot of things happen. What Arthur was just talking about the school. You saw where somebody gave money. You know, folk give money all the time. And the great things that they have done that came up during Hugo is the Meals on Wheels. I mean, that's a great program. And you'll be surprised, there's a lot of people that use that program, that the only people they see in the course of a day are the folk that bring that hot meal to them. The other program that I've been a part of is Habitat for Humanities, where we build homes. Arthur and I served on the board, where we build homes. And most of those homes at the beginning went to black folk, went to us, and still go to us. But the problem now, land is too high in Mount Pleasant. We can't buy no land. So we've spread out to almost Georgetown and Berkeley County. But these are good programs, and our folk are involved, but it's mostly the other folk that support us. Mount Pleasant is not a bad place to live. And I've been here 56 years and hope to die here. I'm going to be buried here right next to my wife. God will give me a few more years. And thank you for listening to my chit-chat.
Well, I've never, in school, in high school, I've never attended integrated high school. But after military service, I went to the Palmer College, and then it turned into technical college. Then from Palmer College, I went to Baptist College, and that's studying some math and history, and then to the College of Charleston. That's where I end up at the College of Charleston. And I think that's what you're at.
Yes.
Doing high school, no. In '63, it was a totally African-American school. But I do want to mention that we did have a lot of teachers that attended Lang, not that came back as teachers. They attended the school, and then because of the history, long history, like Ms. Eddings, she graduated in 1938 from Lang. But during that time, and I'm sorry getting off task with you, but during that time, Lang only, I think up until the 40, and Mr. Brown probably knows the date, that it went to the 11th grade. And then those students would go on either to Avery or to South Carolina State or another HBCU. I wanted to mention that as part of the history of education here east of the Cooper. That said, we have a person in the audience that integrated Moultrie, my sister-in-law. She integrated Moultrie in the 8th grade. Charlotte's a younger sister, and that was a heck of an experience. And I have some notes here on those students who left Lang. I'm trying to remember the year that integrated, when they integrated Moultrie. In 70, 60?
970?
69, 70, yeah. But that's when the migration started with integration, yeah.
Well, I didn't have the privilege to attend integrated school, but it wasn't until after high school when I entered Johnson Will University of Culinary Art, and then I intermingled with blacks and whites.
How was the experience?
The experience was, well, everybody more or less like stand their own grounds, you know. I think I would consider it very good because I made some good friends, and, you know, after graduation, we've gotten together and did projects and stuff like that. So it wasn't bad because most, you know, they were more, it was adults more, you know, everybody was. So it wasn't a bad experience. I thought it was a good experience.
Thank you.
Well, I attended a segregated school, no integrated schools. When I came out, strictly segregated.
Okay. And I know we are, I believe, wanting to wrap around 4:30. I want to squeeze one last question in. What advice would you give to the next generation?
Study, study, study. Just hanging there with education. That's my take on that. It has to be continuing education. Education doesn't stop. I don't care how old you are. Yeah.
My advice to this other generation, like I mentioned earlier, I feel that if you don't have respect for who's teaching you, then the society, the community changes, and I don't know whether we'll be able to do it again or try to get to it, but like I said, once we were taught at home to respect the adult, yes, sir, no, sir. I mean, book learning is good, but you know, old folks will say that manners can get you where money can't. So now, if somehow we could try to get that back in school, to say, well, kids, when you're going to an adult, just like you say yes, sir, and no, sir at home, you go into an adult, you say yes, sir, and no, sir to these teachers. I believe that would get some kind of unity in manners. Because what was mentioned earlier by Mr. Brown, that how teachers are going to school and how the kids are going to school now. Some places you can't tell the teachers from the student because they're all dressing alike, and you do take some etiquette. And all of that, I think, if it would come, if you can get back to some of that culture, I think we'll have a better society and a community.
Just one thing I'd like to say to all parents, all grandparents. If you have children at Wando High School, make doggone sure that they excel. Wando is one of the best high schools in the state of South Carolina. So there's no reason for them to flunk at Wando. They ain't. There's no reason they can give me, black children or white children. They've got all kinds of facilities there. So if any child come out of Wando, they can compete. Think about it. School with 4,000, 5,000 students, and you are there to behave and open up